All right, well, so welcome to the Community Room's virtual art show entitled What Now with Jazmine Gabriel. Uh, Jazmine, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight and thank you for your time and your work. So, can you tell us a little bit about you, who you are as a person, as an artist, and then we'll walk through some of your pieces.
Sure. And thanks to you, Ryan, for organizing this. It's such a great way to keep us all connected during this time. My name is Jazmine Gabriel. I'm an artist working out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania right now. I also work part-time in cancer genetics, and I previously taught philosophy. So there's a little bit of everything all coming to inform my painting, or at least in the background. Um, and I'll probably tell you more about my ideas as I'm going through each painting. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So what we'll do is I'm gonna share my screen, and we have about I think there's about 15 pieces, and they'll show for about 30 seconds, and then we'll show the pieces again and have you talk about each piece. So there was the first slideshow, and we can have you talk about each slide as we see them again. So I'll just again share the screen, and you can just talk and tell me when you'd like to move on.
Sure. All right. So this is a piece that I did about 10 years ago when I was living in Eugene, Oregon. And it was actually meant as just a kind of exercise for another painting. So it was just on kind of a not very good piece of paper, but I ended up liking how it came out. And I'm starting with this piece because it kind of helps to explain a lot of what I'm thinking about and some of the other pieces too. When I lived in Eugene, I would often ride my bike by the Willamette River. And maybe you all have noticed this if you've ever looked at a reflection, but obviously there's the mirror reflection. And then there's what's underneath, seaweed, fish, whatever. But if you kind of angle your eyes just so or relax them, there are these kind of wavy lines of color, horizontal, vertical, diagonal. And this was an attempt to try to capture those, not necessarily what they look like, but what it feels like to be thinking about nature in terms of being composed of these little lines of light. And I guess other things I would want to point you to are just that I put the lines, right, obviously not just in the water, but above too. And that has a certain philosophic aspect that I'll probably explore more in some other paintings, but that I just wanted to kind of alert you to before I move forwards. Let me think if there's anything else. I think we could move to the next one, Ryan. Thanks. So this is a piece that I did immediately after that one, like same minutes, same hour. And you'll see in the top corner, that's kind of a representation of the previous painting a little bit. And so the idea here was to take those lines out of an actual representational piece and just pull them into an abstract piece and just be playing with the lines themselves and creating layers and not so much worrying about making it look like something. So that's what was going on here. And that shows up again and again in a lot of other paintings too. We can move forwards. This one I did a number of years later, and you can see there's a whole series of these, and you can see these on my website, which is jazminegabriel.com. But this is a later part of the series. So the earlier pieces kind of have the horizon stretch all the way across, and there's usually some little figures in it. And so this is similar to the vertical and horizontal lines because you have the long stretch of the horizontal cityscape or whatever it is, and then the vertical of the little figures. And that's kind of a play on or in dialogue with a number of pieces in the history of art where there's kind of this expansiveness of nature and then the existential loneliness of the individual and just juxtaposing those two. Sometimes people will say it reminds them of the river Styx and kind of waiting to go across or something like that. So here I have the kind of two dimensions of the vertical, horizontal, the actual cityscape and individuals, but then also within the city itself. And then the other thing I did here was instead of trying to make the reflection look like a reflection, I made it just this thick, heavy block that's almost floating on top of the water. And it's almost more substantial than the city itself. So usually that would be the reverse, right? The reflection would be just a shimmery imitation of the real thing. But here the reflection is almost like a shelf for the city sitting on top. And there I'm really just thinking about well, nonsense, I guess. It doesn't make sense. And I got tired of trying to have everything make sense all the time. So I was just like, I'm going to make this completely almost not work. Okay. So it's not supposed to look like it's got depth. It's just kind of super flat. Um, and each one in the series is a little bit different, but another play off this same theme. Okay, and we can advance. This is similar and was done close in time to the green ones, the earlier ones. And this is the same idea as the second green one, where just focusing on the lines themselves and abstraction, not so much abstracting from anything anymore, but just focused on these units of abstraction. And I can say that in the background here, I had just completed a dissertation in philosophy. And so my head was full of ideas about the history of science, the history of ideas about nature. I'd spent a lot of time reading Descartes. So I'm thinking about the Cartesian coordinate system, thinking about the origins of modern math and science, and attempts to quantify nature, and the resulting impact on how we understand ourselves, subjectivity, mind, but also how we understand other living beings. And so if you remember the first river image, so the lines are on the bottom and the top, that's kind of thinking about what is a unified conception of nature, what is the nature of reductionism in science, can you reduce everything to its smallest parts, what happens to subjectivity when you do that. So all of that's kind of lurking around in the background, but I'm also just exploring color and like, what is purple and what can I do with just some purple and some lines. Okay. And you can advance. Same theme, same time period. This was in Eugene, Oregon. This one's oil on canvas, and simplifying a little bit. I got the lines kind of got smaller and smaller and more chaotic and intense. And this is, you can see the other painting peeking out from underneath that just got a little too detailed. And so this is just taking a step back and simplifying what I can do with a few lines this way and that, with primarily black and white, or it's probably blue and burnt sienna, making the black and then the white. You can advance. Same deal. This one is called Oregon Window, but I wasn't trying to make it look like a window. I was just trying to come up with a title. It's not my favorite part of the process. But same idea here. This one's in oil. We're just trying to see what can I do with just white, blue, and browns, with this same theme of the horizontal and vertical lines, and trying not to close off shapes necessarily, although you'll see some enclosures there. And the next one. This one is was done after studying an artist named Robert Ryman, who paints all these white paintings that play off of their surroundings. So they look a little bit different in each space where they're shown. And so I was exploring what I could do with mostly just white, a little bit of color and swirl here. And you can see that now I'm kind of moving out of just the rigidity of the vertical and horizontal and throwing in some playful swirls here and there. And the other ideas that were in the back of my mind at the time, where I was reading Darwin and thinking about how living beings evolve and how you can build up from nothing into these emergent forms that are forever surprising us and unexpected and unplanned. And so there's these kind of surprising little loops and swirls. And then this painting might not be the best example of this, but if I see a form start to emerge out of the painting, then I tend to highlight that little area and bring that to life and give it more of a central focus. So not something that I intended to be the subject, but kind of allowing it to pop out at me and highlighting it once it has done that. Okay, next one. This one was also done in Eugene and is similar ideas still, just the river reflections, not having the reflections match the objects around them, and then just kind of throwing in these little lines here and there to remind us of, what is this all made up of, kind of. Yeah. Okay, and the next. This one also experimenting with curves and not just up and down lines. And this is actually an example of what I was just talking about, of making marks, seeing what emerges, then putting the next one on the page, then the next one on the page, and highlighting it as it emerges. And so I don't think I intended this to look like a female form, but as it became apparent that it did, I thought, great, okay, I'll add, a belly button or whatever. And this one was also just seeing what I can do with very simple palette of just white and probably ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Okay, this is part of the Riverscape series, just trying on some different ways of making the city, different palette. No little figures here, but maybe 2 boats. The next one. This one has a little bit of wood peeking out from underneath of it, I see. This is, as you can tell, the same theme, playing a little bit more with the texture in the city area, with the same idea of highlighting what emerges. And so after you build up and build up and build up with these layers of lines, there are certain textures from the accumulation of paint that start to emerge. And then I would take another layer of paint just to highlight those. Okay, next. This one is called Decision. This is actually a painting that I did a long time ago that was all red. One of my favorite paintings, actually, that's right in front of me, is all red, and you can see that one on my webpage too. And so I think I was trying to replicate it, which is really never a good plan. And so it was just sitting. I've carried it around to numerous cities, and it just wasn't hanging together. And one day, it just was feeling some intense feelings, and I went out there and just selected, okay, like these are the parts that are going to be the forms, these are going to be what I focus on, and everything else gets whited out. And it's always hard to choose because there are different interesting color combinations that emerge when you layer upon layer of these colorful lines. So this one was just completed in the last few months. And the next one. Yeah. This one too is a painting that was done on top of another painting that was not hanging together. You can actually see a little bit of the orange. I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but you can see it in the painting. But part of the Riverscape series with playing with the reflections, not being focused on the reflections, matching, and really playing around with the texture quite a bit here. Okay, next. This is one that was done in the last few months as well. I called it Hope, but I don't know if I was feeling particularly hopeful when I painted it, just more that emergence of that yellow area at the top. And I was certainly thinking about just what a hard, dark time this is for so many right now. And how do you make art in this time? What does it mean to be making art when people need so many other things? Or can you say you need art? And so just when I was making these, it just felt like, how do I can't do justice to what's going on in the world right now, but I can't ignore it either. And so what am I painting when I'm in that space? And this is what I made. Same story with this one. Just how do we wrap our heads around what is going on right now? And how do you give voice to the emotional intensity of our human experience right now? This one's kind of reminds me of just just pleading. Reminds me of a yard sign that I saw in November. Don't worry, it's not political. It said 2020, make it stop. Or OMG, make it stop, I think is what it said. Um, and so this was kind of along those lines, just thinking deeply and feeling and reading about what's going on and what to make in that space.
So that's all of them that you sent. So we're going to end into a time of Q&A. So if you have questions, think of something to ask. I'll start with this question. How did you start painting? Like, what was the process like? Because it seems like you have a very diverse background of experience, but when did you start painting?
Yeah. So I painted a lot as a child. My mom was always encouraging me to go to art school, so of course I didn't do that. Um, and then when I finished graduate school in philosophy, it's just so many years of sitting in a little library carrel typing and being hunched over and thinking too hard and being too detail oriented. And when I finished the dissertation, I had a little bit more time, I bought paints and canvases, and I just started with, all right, I haven't painted in a long time. I remember something about primary colors, so let's start with red. First painting red and green, and then I did one green, one blue, one yellow, just to kind of be like, okay, well, if this is a red space, what happens when I put this other color on top and this other color on top, so that I can then draw from that in the future. But then when people saw them, they liked them, and then that encouraged me to keep going and trying more and more different things. So I showed some of them in Eugene, Oregon, and then then I moved to Albany, New York, upstate New York area, and was teaching philosophy for a while. And I kept trying to paint, but I was teaching so many classes that it was hard. But the kind of female form one is from that time. And actually the riverscape with the floating horizon is probably from that time too. So it's kind of been on and off and on and off for years. And then as my friends here know, then I was in graduate school for genetic counseling. I definitely did not even doodle when I was in school. Just really focused on learning. And then with my first jobs, also didn't really have time for this, had a baby, no way. And then March of 2020, right? Saw the days creeping along. I had a feeling it was all going to shut down. And then my daughter's school closed. I had to leave my job. But it was only when she went back to preschool, which I'm so blessed that she's been able to be in school at all, that I was able to really start up the output again, and created a whole bunch more paintings, and have a few of them hanging up right now in town, and then another restaurant in a few weeks. So it's been one of the blessings of this time that I know has been so hard for so many. Long answer to a short question.
Oh, that is beautiful. I love it. Let me ask you one more question, then we'll open it up. So what is your process of creating? Do you have I am not an artist. I just love art, but what is the process like? Do you come up with do you have a thought of here's what I kind of want to say and go at it, or do you just kind of just go at it and see kind of what emerges as you go? or is it kind of both and?
Um, I'd probably rather say it's both and, but it's probably the second one. I just kind of, and I do this less. So when I first finished my dissertation, I was just tired of everything, and I just wanted to not try to do things right. So I would just like squeeze the paint onto the canvas and smear it around. And I don't know how I was like not worried about wasting, but somehow I got into a space of just like, just gonna squeeze it out and see what happens. And I've found that the more careful and thoughtful, the worse it looks. So, and that's why I started liking bigger and bigger paintings, because then you're really kind of getting more out of your head and it becomes more of a bodily thing. So how is it going to feel to move my arm this way and that way? And then you're forced to kind of step back and get some perspective, which is so different than, working on a paper or something where, I don't know about you all, my friends here, but I just, work on it and revise it and get too close and then, make problems and then fix the problems and just never, have such a hard time stepping back from it. And so I was the art is really trying to do something that's not that, or to build off when I do that. So when I start just getting like super detail oriented with all the little lines, there's not really a mistake because you can always just white it all out or make a circle of the best part or whatever. So even I shared all these ideas in the background, but a lot of times I'm just gonna, squeeze the paint out and go for it. Well, I guess the other thing that I do is go ahead.
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. I will kind of put different images around me. So I open a bunch of different art books and maybe copy a shape from here and a shape from there. Or even one painting that I'm working on now, I had like a seed catalog open to, page with different flowers on it. And then I had a Cezanne art book open over here and just had a whole bunch of different images to feed my brain that I'm hoping I'll kind of insert here and there. And that seems to work better than when I just do, go without an idea and just try to see what comes of it. It can sometimes be a little bit of spinning your wheels.
What questions might you have for Jazmine?
Jazmine, I love everything. I would love to hear more about your preference for like the blue burnt sienna color palette and just like what draws you to those colors.
So I often was working with those to learn about how you make grays and blacks. And so some of that is just coming from reading art color theory and what is a simple palette. And yeah, so not so much just trying to learn how do I make these subtle color combinations.
Working off that, do you have colors you don't like to use that you force yourself to?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I would say a lot of these colors I don't like. I told you that my favorite painting is this red painting that I did really early on. I don't really like red. And one thing I did when I was painting that is there was a line in a book I was reading about a Dutch artist, Piet Mondrian, where it said the pink inevitably weakened the canvas or something like that. I don't like pink, but I thought, well, what if I intentionally try to weaken the painting and then fix it? Like what will come of that? So I do sometimes intentionally try to make a problem, because if you have a problem to resolve, it just kind of gives you somewhere to go. But yeah, I would say a lot of, people are like, oh, you must love bright colors. And, my family is always trying to get me to not wear black and gray. I've won a nice blue for you all today because my daughter's favorite color is blue. But yeah, but on the other hand, I often am painting based on what colors I want to see, and trying to mix up some colors that I'm in the mood for. Thank you.
I feel like you've done so many things in your life from going to grad school for philosophy, teaching that, to genetics, to becoming a mother. How do you feel like each of those experiences has changed your way of approaching art?
What a thoughtful, sweet question. I'd like to say it's made me more efficient, but alas. I mean, well, I guess a lot of the early paintings were definitely done probably primarily between the hours of 8 p.m. and beyond. And I definitely do not do paintings in the middle of the night anymore. And so, yeah, being a mother anyway has forced me to kind of figure out how to structure it into the day. And then for the most part, I try to keep it separate from my more domestic life, but sometimes it creeps in. So there was one painting I had a deadline for. And so instead of going off to my studio and working there, I like brought it onto the porch, and it's huge. I can barely hold it. But so I would kind of come in and, give my daughter some yogurt or whatever and be like, all right, I got to go back out here and add this blue. But that's the most I've ever kind of allowed it to come that close. I really like to work privately. I don't like people in my workspace. But I think, I mean, you can hear from what I said, I guess, some of the ways the ideas have influenced what I choose to paint. And I didn't show you some of my more representational pieces, but when I lived in upstate New York, we had a barn. And so I painted a barn, and that was fun. And so all of those experiences have informed my painting and taught me things about how I want to approach this or that. These are such good questions. Thank you all.
I'm wondering if you do listen to anything while you're painting.
So the early paintings I listened to kind of, angsty girl music, Ani DeFranco and things like that. The last few months I listened to like podcasts about COVID. So nothing very inspiring. I should listen to music, I feel like, but I feel like that's a certain kind of multitasking, because I'm like trying to feed all this information so that I know what's going on at the same time that I'm painting, at the same time that I'm emailing or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I feel like the ones that you mentioned you've painted more recently that kind of do depict the past year, you did capture like the chaos and the intensity and the uncertainty so well in those. So those podcasts came right out your paintbrush, I guess.
Yeah. Yay, the daily.
I feel like I could see a lot of like depth in each piece. Like you do a lot of layering, and can you talk more about that process for you? How you decide, how much to layer on top and what inspires that?
Yeah. I think that's so much a reflection of my own really neuroses in a certain way. I do something and I go over it and I go over it and I go over it. And I was reading something recently. It said that the way you know when a painting is done is when someone like yanks it away from the artist. And that's, I think I do have to step back and kind of say like, okay, stop. And my daughter has taught me a lot about that, because she'll just, draw something, draw, and then say, I all done, mama. Well, she doesn't talk that way anymore, but she, like last year, she would say, I all done. And so I try to keep that in the back of my mind, like, don't just keep going over and over and over and over it. But the layering does produce an interesting effect. So it is hard to know how to stop. So often how it works is maybe I'll have one color and then I'll pick the next color that I'm giving and do that next color until it seems either there's a problem or there's a balance, and then pick the next color and layer on top and layer on top. And then if it gets just to be too much, then I just might wait it out and keep some aspects peeking through, but start again. And if you looked at some of my old computers, it would be the same essay, that I wrote once, and then now I got to start over, and then I would write it over again, and then maybe I'd go back to the first one and realize that it was better, exactly the same, or something really frustrating like that. And that's kind of all that same process on the one painting. So it's a way of creating depth that's not actually visual depth, right? It's more just a a subjective depth or a reflection of my own subjective experience.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you for the question.
I feel like I was so impressed by how that actually shone through. Even, this is obviously my first virtual art show. And so it was just really powerful to see how you can tell, like if we were standing in person looking at this, how, what a powerful experience that would be.
Thank you.
I have a question about the emotions you feel when you paint. Some of the things I'm passionate about. I don't have nice emotions while I'm doing them, but I reflect on them with joy. And I was wondering if you have a similar experience or if you feel at peace.
If you reflect on them I didn't hear the last part.
Oh, when I reflect on them afterwards, they bring me joy. So I keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of frustration. I mean, the one called decision is I was angry when I did that. And I think that really helped because I was just like, I'm gonna just do it. And then, I rarely put my feelings to good use like that. So that was a lucky moment. But I mean, sometimes it is more of a piece or just full absorption, which is, always, I think, an ideal that people who make or just any kind of work, I feel like people are looking to lose themselves in it. But I would say probably more often I'm just noticing that there's a problem that I just can't fix. And I have to decide whether to keep trying or whether the trying is actually the problem and then I need to just step away from it.
If somebody were to be interested in purchasing one of these art pieces or want to see more, how do they get in touch with you?
I think email is probably the best way. So my website is jazminegabriel.com. I think there's a contact form on that. But you can also just email me at jazzgabriel@gmail.com. Some of these I actually have sold and some of them I'm not ready to part with, but if there's something that you're interested in that I could try to make something similar, I would love doing that. And I do have prints of a lot of them.
Any other questions that any of you would like to ask before we show the paintings one last time?
Wonderful questions. Thank you all.
Let me ask you one question. It's
Yeah.
when you were as you like reflect back on the experiences of painting, is there a common inspiration that seems to kind of pop up, like as you kind of, maybe not as you're doing it, but like a common thread that kind of has run through a lot of your work?
There's definitely, I enjoy coming back to this layering of lines. I don't know if it's an inspiration or something I fall back on. So I've been trying to kind of pull away from it here and there, but there's something just really rewarding about doing it because it's building off of mistakes, right? It can be something it doesn't have to look good. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be something. It doesn't have to look like something. It's just layering colors of lines and crossing them out if you don't like them. And if you cross them out, then that creates some really cool texture. So it's really more about the activity itself than some kind of image I'm going for or some kind of idea that I'm trying to represent or articulate or somehow communicate.
And one last question: what as you know, like as we're like, if pretend we're in the space that called a community room on King, and the pieces are there, what do you hope for the viewer, the experiences your work?
Oh, what an interesting question. Um, I would hope that it's absorbing and engaging enough that you want to look and see what you can find, see what's surprising, step back. There's not something that you're supposed to see in it. There's one painting that I consider pretty abstract, that my husband says is an ice cream cone. So, whatever you find in it, as long as you're finding something in it and enjoying the looking. Because maybe, to come back to your question before that about inspiration, I do look around a lot and just notice colors and shapes. And then I don't necessarily try to bring those same colors or shapes into the paintings, but just to the experience of looking and enjoying. So like my favorite color is actually two colors. It's the color of that kind of stormy purple color in the springtime with the bright green yellow leaves, buds against it, that contrast. So I'm noticing these and collecting them in my mind, and then hoping that I can create a space for the viewer to look and enjoy looking. There are people that think art shouldn't be beautiful, and I I don't know how to. I spoke about this with those final pieces. I can't really capture all the pain and suffering in the world. I'm really lucky and blessed, and so I'm not really the person who should be doing that. So all I am really doing is sharing with you my own play with these colors and shapes and textures, and saying, hey, do you enjoy looking at this too? Because it's really fun for me to look at these colors.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and run through one last slideshow. So do you have any last words that you'd like to say to us this evening?
Just thank you all for signing on and doing this. Such sweet, thoughtful questions that really helped me think about my process and what I'm doing. And thanks to you, Ryan, for organizing this. And that was probably the longest quiet sitting I've done in a long time. So thank you for that opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for blessing us and gracing us with your work and your thoughtful way of speaking about your art. We really appreciate your support, and please support her. Go to her website, which is
JazmineGabriel.com. Yeah.
and support her work. So thank you so much for tuning in and joining us for this experimental way of doing an art show. So have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.